Because Australia is one country and we all move freely within it, we tend to think it'll be the same with our native plants. And yet, it's not as easy as that. Australia is a complex of different soils and different climates, and to move native plants from one area to another can mean an awful lot of work if you're going to get them to grow successfully. Victorian couple Elspeth and Gary Jacobs spent 12 years in Western Australia, fell in love with the flora there, and Elspeth took up gardening. And now, in the cool, temperate Dandenong Ranges outside Melbourne, Elspeth has found ways to have great success with dry climate plants, not only from WA, but from other regions as well.
Growing West Australian plants is almost exotic when you think of the distance between there and here, but they are still Australian and they still grow with that very low phosphorus tolerance, and there are a lot of similarities still.
So Elspeth, how do you manage to get such a wonderful range of plants to thrive here?
Well, John, I think the first thing is to know where they come from so that you can try and replicate as closely as possible similar conditions. For instance, this Grevillea dielziana comes from just north of Perth, so that means you try and create as hot a spot in the garden as you can, well drained, of course, lots of air movement, so in the north of the property where it gets lots of sun.
I also associate these Banksias with those sort of plants that need better drainage and sunny condition. And this one's Banksia boweri.
That's right, John. A lot of the Banksias are very hard to grow here. It's just not right. The winters are too damp. The drainage isn't good enough. But Banksia boweri seems to be one of the easier ones here anyway.
Just over there I noticed this beautiful Dryandra quercifolia, which is a fantastic plant.
That's right. Great cut flower, this one. You can get a slight pink tinge in the middle, which is very attractive. But that's not a hard one to grow.
Elspeth, I'm really impressed with the mallees. Now, I associate these with hot desert environments.
Yes, that's quite right, John. That's where they mainly come from. I do lose quite a few. I should make that clear, that they don't all just grow happily, but you just keep trying.
This is perhaps the best known of all the mallees for gardens, isn't it? This is Eucalyptus casea subspecies magna. That's grown
right.
widely.
It is. A little bit difficult in Melbourne. The winters are too damp, and also the soil is often too clayey and the roots can't get down, but worth persevering with.
Well, when it grows well, it's just lovely. But
yes.
What a contrast in flower colour with this one, these wonderful bright yellow flowers.
Yes, this is Eucalyptus priceana. It's one of the easiest to grow because I think it comes from way down on the south coast of Western Australia, which means its climate is much closer to Melbourne than a lot of the others.
Initially, Elspeth set out to grow the mallees and wildflowers she fell in love with in Western Australia. But now, 16 years later, she's created a rich and wide-ranging showcase of native plants and grows around 900 different species. So do you grow these from cuttings or seeds?
Almost everything in the garden from cuttings. Then you'll get exactly the same plant as you see. From seed you can always get hybridisation, so you're never quite sure. This Beauforti decussata is from cuttings, and that's quite easy.
And this one?
This one, Pimelia nivea, is a lovely thing, but it's very difficult to propagate. A lot of the grey-leafed things are more difficult. They tend to get too humid and moist in the propagation environment, and they damp off and go mouldy. So you'd have to put in a lot of cuttings to be sure, just to get a few.
Apart from the plants, there really are so many things to love about this garden. For example, I really like the way in which the house is set into the landscape and doesn't dominate it. And a little trick that really works well was to design much of the garden from inside the house. And that means that the views from in there are quite superb. But perhaps best of all, I like the way in which planting of different height is used, in some areas to frame the garden, but in other areas to give you extensive views right the way through, particularly, for example, onto the pond in the distance. So Elspeth, what is it about Australian native plants that makes you dedicate 25 years of your life to growing them?
Well, John, I think I very strongly feel Australian, and I feel this country has developed these wonderful plants over thousands of years to adapt to the climate and the soils, and it just makes common sense to me that they're the plants we should use. I also just love being in the bush, and this is one way of having a bit of the bush in my own backyard.